Good afternoon. Let me begin by adding my last slide here and thank you for the very generous offer to come and speak to you. Beautiful country, historical country, and it's been a joy to be here. What I thought last night, so that I did not duplicate some of the conversations that we've had so far, and what my colleagues would be speaking about, was make some minor modifications to maybe raise this up to the lens of what vocational training looks like at a presidential view, and then drive it down into applied research, what we're doing. We are faced with many challenges and changes going on in vocational training today. In fact, they never seem to end. And identifying what our priorities are going to be significant and different and difficult in the days ahead. There are some of those that we'll be talking around innovation, research and development, and I can tell you from a Canadian perspective that we do research very well. We don't do development as well. We are not commercializing this research in a way that's going to bring economic prosperity and social prosperity to our communities, and that's where I think colleges can play a very important role in terms of driving the economy going forward. The expectations of our work are very high. Students are expecting much from us. Society and industry and our government partners are expecting much. And at the same time, the outcomes that we're judging ourselves on today are changing quite rapidly. We need to start to shift the conversation not from what outputs we have, but what are the desirable outcomes that we're looking for that go well beyond just the technical skills that some people think that we're limited to in the institutions that we are leading. And so if we're going to accomplish this in this rapidly changing higher education environment, we need to start to ask a question about what are the experiences that our students truly require in order to be successful in the 21st century, or the second decade of the 21st century. So in our short journey here this morning, what I'd like to do is maybe take you out of the safe harbors of San Sebastian and out into the ocean, and maybe go a little bit deeper in terms of rethinking what it is that we're doing as people committed to vocational and technical education around the world. And if we were at Algonquin College in Ottawa today, our faculty and staff would tell you that I ask this question constantly of them, and that I say that in every discussion that we have about vocational and training education, we need to ask the question, what does it truly mean to be educated today? So my outline that I'd like to do is just three broad areas to touch on you this afternoon. One, I think in all of these situations I need to add context and add my own personal bias so that you know the lens through which I'm looking at higher education today. I'd like to talk about some aspects of innovation that's not been covered by my colleagues, and then briefly give you my view of why we need to become stronger, particularly at a policy and government level, to champion the type of work that we're doing in our institutions, and then briefly talk about applied research at our institutions, an activity that is now encompassing hundreds of students, hundreds of companies, and hundreds of faculty. So the first thing of my context and personal bias is this. I'm from Ottawa, and I appreciate seeing the Canadian flag over there. It's the nation's capital of our country. Algonquin is mostly located in Ottawa, but we have campuses, brand new campuses in Pembroke and Perth, and the purpose behind that is that our institutions are best positioned to serve rural communities, to allow our students to stay in the communities as opposed to becoming urbanized, and that, of course, is a worldwide phenomena and should be of some concern to all of us. But our reach goes well beyond the artificial confines of Ottawa into China, India, Montenegro. We have a campus in Saudi Arabia, 2 more opening in the fall, as well as one in Kuwait. So we have redefined what it means to be a community college to make it a much more broader perspective. and our students are brilliant. They are non-traditional students. In fact, many of us have seen that the traditional students have become, non-traditional students have become traditional students. They are Oscar winners, Emmy Award winners, and design winners. So we are in the national capital. That can be a good thing. It brings us Canada's greatest hockey team, the Ottawa Senators, and yet because it's the nation's capital, it's an environment it's funded and driven mostly by public sector. In Canada, that's not going to be sustainable. That we have come to realize, or I have come to realize as president, that we must stop thinking about being reliant on government funding. And in fact, if you look at the data around the world, every mature higher education system is typically in decline in terms of the ability to fund it. So we have to start to look at alternative ways and new ways to raise dollars in order to do the craft and the important work that we do. This is exacerbated in a mature country like Canada, where our young people are getting smaller in terms of demographics and widening, that currently we have 42 cents of every tax dollar going into health care, and within the next 10 to 12 years, that's probably going to raise to 70%. There will not be an ability to raise more dollars from the public purse to support what it is that we're doing. So as leaders or advocates for vocational training and education, we need to think about how are we going to continue to do our important work. My own personal biases include where I have studied in Canada and the United States, and in at least two of those, both in Philadelphia and a small liberal arts college in Canada, what was consistent was they felt, including University of Pennsylvania that was started by Benjamin Franklin, that the craft that we do in our classrooms must extend outside the artificial walls that we call a classroom, that the greatest and deepest and richest learning actually occurs when we go outside of our classrooms and move our students into the community to work alongside people in industry. That's why at Algonquin by 2017, every program of all 21,000 students will not graduate unless they have had some type of industry experience before they leave. The second one is I have been blessed to go around the world and look at different higher education systems in Latin America, Asia, Africa, most of the east coast of Africa, and the Middle East. And I can tell you that the work that we do, there is no more important public institutions than the ones that we are leading today, in terms of getting more young people to participate and graduate into the workforce and be able to turn our economies around. And the third one that influences the way I view the world as a leader today is where I'm from, and I like to describe it as a tale of two cities. I live in Ottawa, and consistently Ottawa is ranked the most prosperous, best place to live in Canada. And yet when you walk down that list of places to live in Canada, the number 190th city in our country is my hometown of New Glasgow, Nova Scotia. And so I have this paradox of living in the highest ranked city in the country, but having come from what's ranked as the lowest, worst place to live in the country. And as an educator, that causes me to ask the question, why? New Glasgow is a beautiful place on the ocean. It used to drive the Canadian economy from the fishing, lumber, iron, coal mining. And today, when I visit, there's little there. And when I look at what's happening in Ottawa compared to New Glasgow, Nova Scotia, it has something to do with which of those areas are getting young people into vocational education and training that can go out and make the economy more prosperous. The ones and the countries that invest deeply in this and get people to participate are going to be much more effective going forward. So I would ask all of us to start to rethink our purpose. Why is it that we exist as an institution? Do we exist for the purpose of instruction and teaching? Or do we exist for the purpose of learning. Barr and Tagg wrote about this in 1996, and my position, the position of Algonquin College, is that we exist for the purpose of learning. And if you can adapt that perspective, it liberates you in terms of where learning occurs and how it occurs. It starts to impact how to rethink vocational education and training around the world today. So how do we do that with our existing mental models? I represented Canada at the UNESCO Future of Higher Education Conference several years ago. I was able to visit Germany because I wanted to understand better their great research institutions, which really influence the American research institution today. And how we view parking is one thing, so I've always been inspired by the Germans, but how would that apply to higher education in terms of what are our mental models, how we use technology today? It was just 4 years ago that the iPad came to market, and yet we can't look around a classroom today without seeing a student using it. And the next technologies, we as typical technology laggards really have to think about how we're going to use this to increase access, maintain quality, and drive down the cost of delivery in our institutions today. And it also causes us to rethink about the models or where learning occurs. Do students have to show up in an auditorium like this, or could they learn in another location? And just yesterday, we saw, quite frankly, that they have the ability, and some quite interesting things are occurring right here in this country by redefining where learning occurs. And my mental model through all of this is one of an educator or a teacher, and all of the questions that I come back to, be it innovation or applied research, it goes through the lens of how will this impact and enhance the quality of the learning experience of our students that will allow them to go out and get the jobs that they're looking for. The second point that I would like to touch on is education in Canada. We are doing quite well. If it's OECD data or our own Conference Board of Canada data, we're typically ranked in the very top in terms of participation rates and completion rates. Sadly, though, in terms of innovation, we're ranked more near the bottom, at least according to OECD data, and again, transferring that knowledge into the workforce. So when we think about innovation and economic prosperity, I like to remind people there's many moving parts, and it's not just the college system. That rethinking what we're doing in our K-12 systems are probably one of the most important things that we could do in terms of driving innovation. But I do believe this is our time. That when I look, again, as someone who studies the history of higher education, never has our work been more important than it is today. And that means it's a great responsibility for all of us in terms of how are we going to do the things that our mission and purpose have set us out for. In Canada, we have a serious mismatch of young people that we like to refer to as jobs without people, people without jobs. That they're going off and they're getting a great education, and yet they simply cannot find employment, and at the same time employers are mismatched with the types of skills that they need. And it's not a Canadian phenomenon alone. We heard this morning Denmark is happening. I've done work in Kazakhstan, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait. These are the same themes. In the US, there's a misbalance. In the UK, there's a misbalance. We need to find ways to get young people, and particularly their parents, to rethink of what they need to do from higher education. Because our studies show that when we ask parents where should their children go to get an education, to get employed, in Ontario, 72% of parents say they should come to Algonquin College. When we ask those same parents, but where will you send your children, 74% of them said, I will send them off to university. We need to change that conversation, particularly with our educators, our guidance counselors, but mostly our politicians, our policymakers, and our parents. For years now, we have been talking in Canada about the knowledge economy or the innovative cities. In fact, I'm not even sure what that means, what those words really mean. Perhaps now we need to shift the conversation to the know-how economy, that when students leave our classrooms, leave our labs, that they can actually go into the place of work and make a difference when they graduate. And let me just talk about some champions. Growing up in Nova Scotia, looking across the street on Cameron Avenue, there was a beautiful home of a pillar of our community by the name of Mr. Johnson. And when things needed to be done in our community, when we need to rally people together, when we needed volunteers, we would often turn to him. What did he do? He was a craftsman. He was a construction worker. He could build houses, kitchen cabinetry. Something happened in Canada and many other Western countries, starting in the 1970s, through the 80s and 90s, where we stopped valuing that kind of work. We've seen it in our high schools, where most of those applied labs have had equipment removed, and we wonder why young men are not participating at the rate of young women today. We need to start to rethink and put honor back in to the types of trades, hands-on learning, vocational training that actually drive our economies forward. Not everyone can be computer programmers or gamers or college presidents. If there's one book that I would recommend, it would be this one. We had Matthew up to Algonquin College a couple weeks ago, called Shop Class as Soul Craft, someone who has a PhD who gave that up to go back to his first love as an electrician. It's an easy read, and when you begin to read this book, it makes you feel the importance and the pride of the work that we do. And when certainly this conversation is occurring in the Basque Country about how does work stay here in this country and not be outsourced to other places around the world at a cheaper cost, I can tell you that much of the hands-on vocational trades that we do can't be shipped offshore. Accounting can be, design can be, but the manual labor work we can keep right here. And when you ask a student why it is that they come to a college or a polytechnic like Algonquin, it's very clear. Some faculty would tell you that it's to create higher level thinking skills, to grow as an individual. When you speak to our students, there's no question of why they come to our classrooms, that they expect us to provide them the skills and training that will lead them to an employment and a better life than their parents had. And this notion of liberal arts and applied learning, they are not incompatible. There's some good work being done through AACU in terms of LEAP, and in fact, I'm quite certain that when our students graduate from Algonquin College, they have the ability to make decisions, be problem solvers, and be critical thinkers. So addressing the gap that exists, and how are we doing some of this in the nation's capital? We have a research cycle that we strongly believe that there's an idea. We open our doors to as many companies as possible. They have an application process, and we try to engage our faculty and students in as many of these projects as possible. Develop a solution, and hundreds of our students have gone on to be employed by these same companies that they have done research with. Applied research at Algonquin, there's all kinds of different definitions, of course, but it's an experiential learning activity trying to bring together our brilliant faculty, our innovative students, and connecting them with industry who need help. And most of those companies are small, medium enterprises that don't have the resources to be able to drive their solutions forward. And as a public institution that exists for the public good, it's my belief that we need to open our doors and support those companies. And the benefactors, quite frankly, become our students. It enriches their learning, it makes them more prepared, it allows our faculty and staff to grow. Most of our faculty have great academic qualifications, but they have come from industry, and to go back and work with industry is extremely motivating. And what it's doing in Ottawa as a government city is it's starting to drive a new type of economy that we call Silicon Valley North, and it's creating new jobs and more prosperity as government cutbacks occur. The number of students will surpass 1,000 this year in applied research projects, and we've been able to connect with hundreds of companies, including starting a company like Chidit, which is now over 80 employees in Ottawa. It's an online survey company, and many of the students actually working there are actually Algonquin grads. And there's technology solutions that we can find through applied research. We have a crisis in contact sports. Certainly we see it in North America through football and ice hockey, that our students working with Impact Protective have gone on to develop a sensor that's relayed into a mobile device that's being tested in the NFL and the NHL and a number of other contact sports, all because of a small company needed access to equipment, facilities, and bright minds, and we were able to provide those. From a client's point of view, they say that it increases their competitiveness, and from a student point of view, it allows them to apply what they learn in an artificial environment we call a classroom and put it into real life and real applications. It allows our faculty to remain renewed, keep up with their areas of expertise, continue to be linked into the community and broaden linkages, and provide themselves professional development. As our Director of Applied Research says, it also puts some pep in their step. It seems to motivate our faculty to go back in and do this kind of thing. So what's it done from a Centres of Excellence? We've received millions of dollars of funding from a variety of different sources to create a design center where we're testing out and creating things like human-computer interface designs, virtual reality gaming. We've been able to launch a full Spectra Center, which basically means that we can test out wireless infrastructure across our city, working with local companies. We have a construction research center that are pressure testing new types of building materials in a harsh environment like Canada, 3D visualization tools, and we've been able to launch a health and wellness center of excellence where we're doing things like creating 3D software for dentists to be able to take better work while they do their dental work. Our grand vision for applied research is that we believe that every student can be a researcher, that all of the students deserve the opportunity to connect with industry, to solve problems in a real-life setting, and better position themselves for employment. And so finally, 3 concluding thoughts I might leave you with this afternoon. Number 1 is, yes, these are strange times. It is a bit freaky with all this wireless technology. The world that we have adopted in higher education is a world that we never knew. It's something that our faculty never bought into. As leaders and policymakers, we need to find ways to help them to be successful. Each year, we commit to over $3 million in professional development to our faculty to be able to help them navigate this strange new world that they're in. Number 2 is this should not be new to us, the type of environments that we're creating. We've all been there before when we were in kindergarten, when probably the most innovative, creative times in our learning careers actually occurred, when we brought students together and made them work together, and they invented and they created, and we celebrated things by putting them on the wall. Somewhere through the K-12 system, we suck the innovativeness right out of those students, and the more they can sit there quiet, we think the better learning's occurring. We need to rechange that quickly. And the final one is from a great Irish poet, Brendan Kennelly, who said in his 1991 book, The Book of Judas, the best way to serve the age is to betray it. As leaders, or certainly as a president today, it's a constant challenge for us to try to find ways to push our faculty and staff to think differently, challenge their mental models, and betray everything that has been able to get us to where we are today. I describe it as higher education's paradox, that I'm convinced that whatever got us to where we are today is not going to get us to be successful tomorrow. And with that, let me say thank you once again.